This is the Purple Passion Project with host and clinical sexologist, Dr. Stacy Friedman. This is your go-to podcast for raw, real, and irresistibly juicy conversations about sex, intimacy, connection, and everything in between. Whether you're feeling a little stuck in your love life, curious about what turns you on, or just craving conversations that actually matter, you're in the right place. So now, please welcome the host of the Purple Passion Project, Dr. Stacy Friedman.
What do you get when you mix purple, passion, and permission to be your true self? This podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Stacy, and this is the Purple Passion Project, coming to you live and unfiltered. And this is the show where we talk sex, intimacy, connection, and everything underneath the surface. Because let's be honest, small talk is boring, and you're ready for the good stuff. So relax, drop your guard, get ready for truth, laughs, maybe a few gasps, and a whole lot of passion. So today's episode, we are going to be talking about pleasure starting at the core of our pelvic floor. And we want to be able to talk about the floor's role in intimacy and how it could affect you sexually as well. So today we are diving deep, literally and figuratively, into a part of the body that most people don't think much about until something actually goes wrong. That is the pelvic floor. And joining us today is someone who's changing lives from the inside and out, quite literally. It's Susan Winograd. Yay! Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
Susan, how are you?
Good. I am like smiling from ear to ear because literally everything you just said is every single conversation we have. Fun, laughs, diving deep, sex, pleasure. I love it.
Awesome. Well, Susan is an amazing pelvic floor therapist and the founder of Pelvicore Rehab, where she helps people restore function, release pain, reconnect with their bodies in very powerful ways, from pleasure to posture. She helps clients reclaim their strength and confidence through her compassionate approach. So get comfy, because this conversation is going to empower you to make sure that you stay healthy in ways you've never expected. So thanks again for being here. Susan and I have collaborated many times together, and it's always so awesome and so much fun. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad
You're
to be here.
welcome. So what I want to do first is just, first of all, explain, how did you get into pelvic floor therapy? And then what exactly is the pelvic floor, so people understand what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's the most common question. How did you get into pelvic floor therapy? And I always give the same answer. I think pelvic floor therapy finds you. So before I founded Pelvicore Rehab, I owned another company called Home Advantage Rehab, and I was really doing outpatient physical therapy in people's homes, essentially orthopedics. And
Okay.
you know, Stacy, we're have similar personalities. When we are in it to help someone, we're really looking at the big picture and root causes. So I had a physician that was very frequently referring to me for balance issues. I would go into the patient's homes and thinking I was going to help them restore their balance, but essentially was finding that there was nothing wrong with their balance. They were falling because they were running to the bathroom and couldn't get there in time. And
Oh, wow.
that really
Interesting.
sort of got me curious and got me interested in saying, there's a piece of the puzzle here in people's health that's missing, that no
Mhm.
one's looking at, and that a lot of healthcare providers are overlooking, not
Oh,
intentionally, right? But
absolutely.
you definitely know this, but they just don't know about it. So, I kind of went undercover and became a little bit of a detective in my effort to help these people. And I started doing bowel and bladder retraining within the context of that business. And what I noticed very, very quickly was that this was complex, fascinating, interesting, and there was a huge gap in healthcare that needed to be filled. fulfilled. So I essentially went home one night and I told my husband I was reinventing myself. I flew out to Minnesota and took my first pelvic health and wellness course. And I always say they gave me the Kool-Aid and I haven't stopped drinking it. I feel like it is the most fascinating field. It is interesting and holistic and integrative, and it really is where everything starts. I love that I can help people understand so much more than functionality, but how complex and essential this system is that supports us from the inside out. And I have, not stopped. I closed my other company. I launched Pelvicore Rehab, and it's truly evolved into something that I'm proud of and that I feel is special.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And like you said, it is definitely complex. And just even the people that I've sent to you and the work that we've done together, it is complex, but yet it is so needed because there's so many people that don't know what direction to go, what to do. And they're like, oh, well, what is that? I don't understand. I don't know what it is. So when someone says, what is the pelvic floor and why do we need to talk about it? How do you explain to them what the pelvic floor actually is?
right. So I'm going to answer that, but I think why our collaboration is so important, Stacy,
Mhm.
is because I think when people see Dr. Stacy, they think of pleasure. When they come to me, they think functionality. And sometimes I think that they believe that they have to choose. And when they meet us and work with us, they begin to understand that they can have both and that they
Yeah,
should
it's a
have
combination.
serve both, right? It's got to go together. So when people say, what is the pelvic floor? My answer is that it's a group of muscles that is skeletal muscle. It's like any other muscle in the body. So the great thing about the pelvic floor is that it responds really well to physical therapy. It could have tension that you can release. It could have weakness that you can strengthen. So it's a group of muscles like any other muscle in the body. It lays at the base of the pelvis. So I'm going to show you like a little 3D
Oh, I
cutout here.
love the diagrams.
This would be your sacrum, which is in the back of the body that connects to your spine, and here's the pubic bone. So the pelvic floor muscles are a group of muscles that go from your pubic bone all the way back to the tailbone and from one side of the hip to the other.
It
If
affects
you
the
are
whole area.
Yes. So if you're looking at the body from the head down, you would see a bowl shape, a hammock shape, a circle or hammock shaped group of muscles that go from front to back and side to side. The fascinating thing about it is that there are 3 layers of pelvic floor muscles, and each layer has at least 3 muscles in it and left to right. So it's pretty complex. When we're assessing the pelvic floor, we're assessing layer by layer, each
Wow.
muscle, each layer, and then left and right. And there are 2 really interesting things about the pelvic floor that I think everybody should know is that number one, like any other group of muscles in your body, it doesn't work in isolation. The pelvic floor muscles is part of a system that works together like a hydraulic pump. So on the bottom, here's my little chicken. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, wait,
There we
up a little. Yep, other way.
go.
There you go, right there, right there. There's the chicken.
Here's the pelvic floor, right? On the top, we have the respiratory diaphragm. So the ceiling is the muscle for breathing. The bottom is the floor. The front is the deep abdominal muscles. And then we have those deep back muscles in the back. And these 4 muscles work together as a system to literally keep us upright. This system is what prevents us from falling. It is what supports us when we laugh, when we cough, when we sneeze, when we jump, when we lift our arms, when we strike our foot to walk. I always say, those things on the side of the road that are like these floppy things?
Those blow up things, yeah.
If we didn't have that deep core system that we just talked about, Yeah, we would look like what Dr. Stacy's doing right now. The fascinating thing about that system, Stacy, is that it is led by the breath. So with every breath we take, our lungs inflate, our diaphragm goes down, our abdominal contents goes down with it, and our pelvic floor muscles lengthen, relax, and broaden, right? We exhale, the pressure is released from our lungs, and everything shortens, recoils, and engages. So with every breath we take, we lengthen, and with every exhalation, we retract. We broaden and we recoil. So the breath is essential for the functioning of the pelvic floor, and it is reflexive. It's the only system in our body that is anticipatory, that's reflexive, that supports us and engages before we even move. So that's how the pelvic floor works in conjunction with the rest of the body. But when we're thinking of the pelvic floor proper, we want to think of its function as 5 S's. Okay, so there's a sphincteric component, right? Sphincteric means opening and closing. So we're not peeing and pooping all over the floor, right?
That
The
helps.
second one is sexual. So a lot of the pelvic floor muscles attach right to the top of the clitoris, right on top of the clitoris, right on top of the clitoral hood. So you can see this external, this first layer of pelvic floor muscles has a huge sexual component. And then there is a support because our pelvic organs live right on top of the pelvic floor muscles. There's a stability component because, like we just said, it's part of that deep core system. And it also has a sump pump component, a lymphatic component. Like any other muscle in the body, as the pelvic floor contracts and releases, it helps to regulate lymphatic fluid. So it
It
is
does everything.
does everything and so much more. I always say it is the part of the body that we all ignore, that doesn't get so
But
much
it's so
attention,
important.
but does everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, you could see where not only it affects other parts of the body, but sexually, there is a component that if your pelvic floor is not right or too loose or too tight, it can affect sexual function. And do you feel that it's just a women's issue, or should men be concerned about pelvic floor health?
I love that question because I think that was rhetorical for because you wanted people to have the information because in my practice we
Right.
treat
Because that
we
is definitely a question. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to understand that yes, men have pelvic floor issues just like women do, and actually the anatomy of the pelvic floor muscles in men is very, very similar to the anatomy of the pelvic floor in women, with the exception of the external genitalia, obviously, and then the pelvic organs. But men can have bowel, bladder, and sexual dysfunction just like women. And it happens all the time. And it
Right.
breaks my heart because a lot of times they are literally ping ponged from practitioner to practitioner before they find a pelvic floor specialist. And it was really the pelvic floor all along that was driving the dysfunction.
Right. And a lot of the physicians are not aware that that is something to look into. And that's why, I know that I've worked with a couple men that I've, referred to you and everything. And that basically they're like, oh, well, we didn't have any idea that it was something that we can do or we can look into. And I do want to, talk about a little bit more on how people experience their pain or their problems in the next section. So what we'll do is we'll just take a quick 2-minute break, and then we'll listen to the words from our sponsors, and we'll come back and we'll start getting a little bit more into detail on that because it's very, very interesting. So we'll see you in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hi, and we're back with Susan Winograd, an amazing pelvic floor therapist with Pelvicore Rehab. And we were just talking before the break about how issues with the pelvis can be for men and women. And so we wanted to just see a little bit about understanding about how it can affect men. And you had mentioned something about possible like prostate issues. So do you want to just, talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so, what we see most often in our practice, and I think any pelvic floor therapist that helps men will agree, is that when a man has bowel, bladder, or sexual dysfunction or challenges in any of those areas, too often their healthcare provider will say it's prostatitis. Even if they've had biopsies or cultures and they're negative. Yeah, they're negative, but they have they'll be told they have prostatitis. They end up going on several rounds of antibiotics. They don't get better. And then, as you know, the longer pain lives on, the stronger those pain pathways they become, and they really develop into complex layers of pain. And these men really end up usually going from 7 to 10 doctors. They wind up doing their own research, come to pelvic floor physical therapists, only to find out that it was truly their pelvic floor that was driving pain that was the entire time. In fact, there was a category of prostatitis called abacterial chronic prostatitis, which was completely eliminated and renamed chronic pelvic pain syndrome, because what they started to understand was that it wasn't the prostate at all. They were getting these symptoms at pelvic floor tension. So I think it's really important, what you don't know. So I wish that all men would be aware that they have a pelvic floor, what the functions are, and if they're having any issues in any bowel, bladder, or sexual area, that they should know to advocate for themselves and say, hey, I think that there
could it be this
with my pelvic floor. Can this be something that I look into? Because we can't advocate for ourselves when we don't know it exists. So I really want all men to know that they can present with bowel, bladder, and sexual dysfunction, just like women. It could be their prostate, but it isn't always. And we have to look at the big picture for them as well.
No, it's great information. So hopefully if we get some men seeing this, they'll know that there is another avenue if they're not able to get the support they need from all of the people that they've checked, all the doctors they've been to. And so you were talking about pain. And I know that a lot of women experience pain during sex. And I know from my own story, I had pain for 6 years after childbirth. And I did go through physical floor therapy and I went through all these other things. And for me personally, it was issues with nerve endings and things like that. And I wound up finally having surgery after 6 years and was able to get better. But I did experience the pelvic floor therapy, and there's a lot to it. And there's a lot of people that get support from that. So how is the pelvic floor involved when you're dealing with, let's say, vaginal pain? Because I know that I've sent you people, so maybe explain to everybody how it's involved.
That's a great question. And, there's very few circumstances, which fortunately or unfortunately you ran into, where you have these neurovascular bundles that are so woven tightly together where surgery is, I think, 97% effective. But you also
Right.
need a physical therapist that's going to say, hey, I think like you need to go
Try
see a doctor.
this.
So we have to become really good at differential diagnosis and help steer our clients in the right direction. With pain, with sex, with women, there are so many things that can drive it. What I find very commonly is that either women have pain with initial penetration or with
Right.
deeper thrusting. And what we need to look at is what muscles are involved with pain with penetration. Is there any scar tissue that maybe they had some tearing from when they had went through childbirth? Did they have an episiotomy? Did they have an
That's
episiotomy that
yeah,
caused tear?
tearing and yeah.
Didn't heal properly? Um, and we have to kind of look at the big picture and put the puzzle
Right.
pieces together. So that's one thing. We want to look at pelvic floor tension patterns. We want to look at scar tissue, but we also want to look at what's going on with the person hormonally, right? So the vaginal tissues, the urethra are very, very estrogen dependent. So
Right.
when we're dealing with a woman, let's say who's in perimenopause or in even menopause, and they're losing estrogen, or even postpartum, where we have these wild fluctuations in hormones, women can have dryness, irritation,
Yeah.
that can cause pain with sex. And then we also want to look at trauma. And trauma can look very different to different, for different people. So it could be abuse. It could be a negative experience at a gynecologist's office. It could be a negative experience with a partner. And sometimes people really can't identify what it is. But in those situations, our nervous system's number one job is to protect us.
Protect.
Nervous system senses threat, it is going to respond with muscle guarding. Yes. So these women who have what we call vaginismus, their
Mhm.
muscles literally can clamp shut in an
Right.
effort to protect them, sometimes to the point where it causes pain with penetration, and sometimes they cannot achieve penetration. And it is very, very painful. And although they may now be with a partner that they do trust or they do feel safe with, their nervous system does
The
not
memory.
yet, right? They still
Yeah.
have that those pathways that are telling them to guard. And we also know that in order for that arousal switch to go on or that desire button to be pushed, we need to feel safety, right? We need
Absolutely.
to calm, we need to feel safe, we need to feel like we can let go. And when our nervous system is in protective mode, we certainly can't get there. So we really, really have, there's no one reason why women have pain with sex, but the three big categories that I would look at is negative experiences with intimacy or the pelvic floor, like a
Right.
GYN exam, muscle tension, and there could be a hormonal component also. The one thing that I really want everybody to know is that it is so common, but it is not normal. And the thing that I love the most about helping people that have pain with intimacy and sex is that once we can identify what it is, we can usually resolve it completely. And it is so life changing for people. Like,
Absolutely.
right? Did you ever have this experience with a client who they come in? I mean, we're in the only profession who our clients have sex and get sent emojis of fireworks in the morning, right?
Yes, 2 in the morning. We broke a dry spell. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And you're like, want to sing it from the rooftops. But, these clients feel such a tremendous unburdening and release and sense of wholeness in
Well,
themselves.
right. And just not to interrupt you, but I just know even personally, when I went through it, you feel less of a wife, you feel less of a woman, you feel less of a lover. You just feel like, okay, am I just friends with my partner? And it really does, even though sometimes you feel safe, you could have just a couple of experiences. And I remember after my surgery, um, even though I knew I would be okay, mentally my body was, like you said, it was just shut down, and I had to do a lot of work to be able to allow my body to relax, allow the vaginal opening to relax, all that kind of stuff, and that is loosening the pelvic floor, all that stuff.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. I think our bodies and our nervous system is the most intricate piece of architecture that has
Absolutely.
been created. And it's incredible how protective our nervous system gets of our bodies. And thank goodness for that, right? So often it keeps us safe. But
Right.
once we are safe, our nervous system doesn't always know it. And we have to retrain it to
Right.
understand. And that retraining, my only three rules with that retraining is that people do not feel pain, they do not feel threatened, and they feel in control. That's how we train the nervous system to understand that there is no threat. But yes, in
Right.
answer to your question, it rocks your world when you have pain with sex, your relationship with yourself, your sense of self.
Your
You know,
identity, absolutely.
identity. How many clients have you said, I feel like I'm broken? I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was the
Right.
only one. I wish
That's
I
a
could.
big one.
Yes, yes. I
That's a
thought
big
I was
one.
the only one. Why didn't anybody tell me about this?
Well, I'll
Um,
tell you, I was the only one, according to what I thought. And this was years ago. This was probably 17, 18 years ago. I thought I was the only one because at the time, 18 years ago, it wasn't as known. I actually had to call on the phone 42 doctors, and I actually went in to see 9. And it wasn't until the ninth doctor that I actually got diagnosed with, they call it vestibulitis, which is the inflammation of the nerve endings in the vestibule of the vaginal opening. And finally, I was like, wait a second, there's a name to this? It
yes.
wasn't so prevalent and people didn't know. So what you said is so important, to be able to go in there and see you and be like, you are normal and we're going to make this okay.
Right. And really, truly, Dr. Stacy, it's because of people like you who are airing podcasts like this that other people will not have to call 42 doctors. And I think we have to really acknowledge that
Yeah.
as a community of healthcare providers, we all are literally screaming it from the rooftops because we want everybody to know that
Absolutely.
they don't live with this.
Right. And they're not alone. And when I'm working with someone that I can't seem to get to a place where their pain's going away, that's when I call you, and you have someone that maybe has finally gotten rid of some of the pain. And then you call me, and we're able to, like you said, the collaboration is so important between the GYNs, the pelvic floor therapists, the sex coaches. We need all of us to be able to get through this?
Absolutely. We have a trusted provider list that Dr. Stacy's on because we work together all the time. But before I put someone on that list, I ask them, and I've had, meetings with doctors who I really like, and I say, I just need to ask you one question before I put you on my list. And that question is, how accessible are you? Because as a pelvic floor physical therapist, I quarterback people's care because I
Right.
have the humility to know that sometimes they need more than I do. Sometimes it takes a village, and I want to make sure that the village that I cultivate for my clients is one of communication, collaboration. And so we all need to work together so that person can get the best outcome in the shortest amount of time.
Absolutely. So you're not just having to pick one over the other, and everybody is working together. So that's awesome. And then you're showing that there's a connection between stress, between trauma. So sometimes even the trauma, you may need mental health therapy at the same time of using pelvic floor therapy. And then sometimes that could intertwine with the coaching. The collaboration is so important. And I just love that the passion that you have helping people, and the way that we've worked together has been so amazing, trying to work and helping others. But just being able to be on these types of platforms and explaining to people what is pelvic floor, how, people may not even realize, oh, well, I did have trauma. I didn't realize that could actually affect things. So I'm
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
thankful that you're here.
Thank you. And I'm
Yeah.
so thankful that you're doing this podcast. And yes, sometimes I just want to say, sometimes I will tell clients, in order for us to work together, I need you to be working with a psychotherapist because
Yeah.
I can help you get rid of the pain. I can't help you process the pain.
Right.
That's outside of my wheelhouse. And then sometimes I need people like yourself who we help them get rid of the pain, but they're still not speaking the same
There's
sex
still
language,
need, yeah,
right? Or they still
absolutely.
can't get out of their head. And they need a new language. They need a new repertoire. They need new context. And that's where you come in so magnificently. So, instead of thinking it's got to be like one person who does everything, I think clients should be saying, thank God there are different people for
Right.
different.
Thank God we're working with others to help out. So that's awesome. But we're going to take another quick 2-minute break for our sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more with Susan. Thank you.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey, everybody, we're back with the Purple Passion Project with Susan, our pelvic floor therapist. I wanted to talk a little bit about normalizing care and breaking down shame. And there might be some questions from the audience that you may have. So you're welcome to call in this segment, next segment, and ask some questions. We'll leave a little bit of time if anyone pops on. Otherwise, feel free to message us and we can get back to you through another avenue. But, because of what we do and working with sexuality and intimacy and pelvic floor, there is a lot of shame and people don't really know or kind of have a fear of reaching out for support, especially like, well, what's a pelvic floor therapist? What do they do? And what kind of an exam are they going to do to me? So can you give everybody a little idea of how your typical exams go on a, first time basis so people aren't so nervous?
Absolutely. So I think it all starts actually with the initial phone call they make to the office. I think it is so important for clients to feel like this is the right fit. It's like a relationship, right? Like when you call a
Absolutely.
sexologist or a therapist, you need to know on the phone that you've made the right choice. So it starts there. And then we prepare people. We do send them a lot of paperwork because we have a complete biopsychosocial approach integrated into our practice. We send them paperwork about what they're experiencing physically. But also, you said there's a lot of shame involved. And there are also different emotions. The second you have pain, there's an emotional component that happens, right? So what we learned is that if you do not address that emotional component, you will never be able to fully resolve the physical part of it. So we send people paperwork for their physical discomfort. Are they experiencing depression, anxiety, stress, worry? How confident do they feel in their body? How connected or disconnected do they feel from certain parts of their body?
I
How
love that.
is their nervous system? How much is their nervous system magnifying or zoning in on the pain? And then we actually take quite a bit of time to review that before they come in because we want to make sure that we are
The
really,
right
really
fit.
when they come. Then we have them come in. Our initial assessments are 90 minutes. I don't know of any other practice that takes that amount of time, but we do that because I want to have time to talk to people. I don't want to be rushed with the physical assessment. I want
Oh,
to
you
sit
learn
down.
a lot.
Yes, I want to sit down. I want to make eye contact with them. I want to hear their story from them. Yes, I review their paperwork, but I get the best information about what is going on with people from the stories they tell me. And, if we had another hour, I could go into several stories from clients about how their paperwork reflected one thing, but once I started talking to them, there were so many more layers that were revealed that helped me to help them. So I talk to them on that first session. We do a ton of education because we all know, I think people come to me with this assumption that if they're having pain with sex or difficulty achieving orgasm or penetration, that we're going to do something physical and it's all going to be better because I'm a physical therapist. But we all know that sexual appreciation is just as much in our heads as it is in our bodies. So we do a ton of education on arousal, desire, spontaneous desire, responsive desire. Should they be having sex with their partner if they're in pain? What positions may be helpful?
I mean, that
We give
helps normalize right away what they're feeling or thinking is to just have that education. That's great.
Absolutely. We talk about foreplay, how to have foreplay, what kind of foreplay, how much time should I spend on foreplay? We talk about lubricants and moisturizers because I really want people to understand the big picture. So once we've really gotten, through that story and now they feel like they're armed with a ton of education, then we go into the physical assessment, which is head to toe. Because if you remember, we said that the pelvic
Right.
floor works as a coordinated system with the
With
diaphragm and
everything else.
the back muscles. So we look at people's alignment. We look at their rib cage. We look at the muscles between their ribs. What's their breathing pattern like? How are they managing pressure in their systems? We ask them about their bladder and their bowels. And then we have them lie down. We do a full external exam. So
And by that time, they're comfortable because you know their whole life story by then.
safe. They're ready. They're ready and
Put it
excited and
in.
motivated to get this process started. And we
Right.
are trained to do both internal vaginal and internal rectal exams. We always make sure that the client feels safe. We make sure they know that this is not a gynecological exam. It should not be painful. They are in control and they can tell us at any point that they do not want to do the internal exam, but it really does give us a lot of information
Absolutely.
as to what's going on in the pelvic floor, externally, in the middle layer, in the deeper layers. And then we gather that information. We sit back down with them. I leave the room. I say, put everything back on. When you're done getting dressed, open the door. I come in, I sit down with them again, and I say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. These are all the findings. This is how we're going to put the pieces of the puzzle together. At this point, they understand what average pelvic floor function should be like. They understand what's going on with them. And I've completely explained to them what I think we will need to do in order to get them back to where they want to be. And then we have question and answers. So it's
Right. So
really
they can make an educated decision as to how do we move forward, things like
Yeah,
that.
it's really an incredible learning experience for everybody, both educationally about anatomy and physiology, but also about their own bodies. Many times I take a mirror and I'm like, this is this external genitalia. This is your first layer of pelvic floor muscles. This is your labia majora. This is your labia minora. This is your clitoris, the clitoral hood. We have I do education about the clitoris, about how the clitoris is so much bigger of
I got a
an
purple one.
I'm shocked that you got a purple one, but about how the clitoris is so much bigger of an organ than we think it
And we
is.
think, right.
Yeah. So, they definitely empowered, and they leave that very first visit armed with strategies to start their healing. And then, we basically cultivate a plan of care that they are very much a part of. And they do great. People that are ready and want to get better do great.
No, that's awesome because the education, I mean, that's not something that we learn. We learn about anatomy and physiology in school, but we don't learn about the intricacies of that. And I know just even with me, I work with women that are in their 40s and 50s that have never understood what a clitoris was or where it was. And they were thinking it's inside. And I have a pillow that shows a little pearl on the outside saying that this is the clitoris. Oh, I didn't even realize. And so people just don't know their bodies enough. So the fact that you spend that time to educate is amazing. And, there's just so much to it. There's just learning, even learning how to breathe properly, because you said that the diaphragm affects things, your posture, your core strength, all that kind of stuff affects the pelvic health as well.
I think it was you. You were an expert at my event called Ask the Experts. And I think one of my previous clients, I'm pretty sure it was your event, raised her hand at the end of the event and said, I came to Susan, I was having pain with sex, and she got me better. And I told all my friends about it. And people would say, well, what did she do to make you better? And my client said, I don't know. She told me to breathe, and I breathed, and it got better. Everybody started laughing. It was a little more
Right.
involved in that, but the breath is a foundational component of pelvic health. And
Right.
we should never underestimate the power of the breath because it can affect every system in the body.
Absolutely. And it affects people that are trying to have orgasms too. And one of the things, just even the education part, is understanding where your clitoris is. People
Yeah.
will be like, okay, well, I didn't realize it. And I would say something about, people having orgasms that's only 20% maybe of women will have orgasms through intercourse. And they can finally be like, oh my God, I can breathe. I can feel normal. And so then all of a sudden they can relax through their experience, and their respiratory function is much better because they're not feeling so much pressure, and they're able to have a healthier sexual
Yeah.
experience and a healthier orgasm.
Yeah, I had a couple of years ago, I had a 55-year-old woman who came to my practice and she said, I just came to see what's wrong with me. And I said, okay. And we started just going through the process that I just told you. I got her history. Her major complaint was that she had never orgasmed with a partner. And as we started going through the education, I said, well, about 85% of women need clitoral stimulation in order to climax. She looked at me and she's like, get out. Get out. She was like,
I just
why
don't know.
tell me that? And it turns out her pelvic floor was fine. She was healthy. She just had very
No
poor
idea.
education. She had no idea how to advocate for herself, how to communicate with her partner, and had no idea how her body worked.
Right.
I want to say she left super happy, but I think she was more sad to really finally realize, like, oh
She had
my
no
God,
idea.
55 years old and
Yeah.
I've lived my whole life not knowing how to have pleasure from basic anatomy.
Well, I
Um,
think that we're so censored nowadays in this world that the podcasts are so helpful, the education, all these kind of things, because we're not able to learn this when we're in high school. And even, when you're trying to go into regular therapy, they don't always teach them about the sexual aspect of things and the pelvic floor aspect of things. And so it's important just to be able to find that education to really have positive relationships.
Right, absolutely. And different modes of education, right? So
Yeah.
there's great books now that are out, podcasts,
Right.
even social media and YouTube. You've got to be careful to make sure you're going to a reliable and expert-led platforms.
Right.
But when you are on an expert-led platform like what we are on right now with you leading it, you can learn so much. But you have to be interested and you have to like seek that knowledge. And it's just that's a cautionary tale. Don't wait until you're 55. If
Right.
you're dissatisfied, if you're not getting what you intuitively know you should be getting out of a relationship, if you don't intuitively know you're not being sexually satisfied, become your own detective. We have to be our own best advocate. The information now is out there. The help
Right.
is out.
Ask questions and look
Ask
for the support. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to just take another 2-minute break, and we'll be back soon, and we'll get to find out exactly where we could find you and find out some fun activities that you can maybe give us some ideas of what we can do with our pelvis to give very, very good pelvic health. And we'll be back in 2. Thank you.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com.
Welcome back to the Purple Passion Project. Hi, Susan. We are wanting to talk a little bit more about the pelvic floor and maybe get some ideas of some tools or takeaways. I know that they talk about the Kegels. Give us some ideas of some simple exercises or simple things that we can do. Are Kegels something that we should be doing? And if so, what do we do with them? How do we do them? And give us some other great ideas for people to help their pelvic floor.
That's a great question. So what I always say is people always want to know to Kegel or not to Kegel. That's the question. And I always say, I don't know. I have to evaluate your pelvic floor. Kegels are great for some people that have weakness. When you have pelvic floor weakness, you may have a harder time achieving that great orgasm that you people dream about, because the muscles just can't contract as well. You can't get as much blood flow in. And Kegels are great for those people. But when we think about Kegels, we also have to be very individualized. We want to give a fit prescription. We want to talk about function, intensity, interval, timing. So our Kegels are our Kegel programs are very specific to the person. Number
So
one,
we don't all just sit here and go like this all day.
we want to make sure that we don't do that, because they actually did a study on several hundred women and found that 80% of women did Kegels incorrectly. Because if you open and close, you may not be working through all three layers of the pelvic floor. We want to think of a close and lift. So we want to get very specific about that for people that need it. But I've had several people that have come to me and said, I'm having pain with sex. I really don't understand. I've been doing Kegels and it's been getting worse. And that's because in many cases, if they have pelvic floor tension, you want to do the opposite of Kegels, right? You want to relax. So Kegels should not be something where people are just opening and closing, putting jade eggs in their vaginas, or, everything could be helpful, but you've got to understand what's going on in your body and what your body needs specifically. So that's kind of like, that's my take on Kegels. Just know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if you do need it, in fact. And what I tell people, to experiment with is, number one, experiment with your breath. Use different kinds of breath. Use a rocking breath into your pelvic floor and out. If you're feeling tired and you want to get revved up for sex, use an energizing breath. Your breath is what leads the pelvic floor. So experiment with different kinds of breath. The other thing I tell people to do is spend more time on foreplay. Be playful about it. Have, nights with your partner where the end game is not an orgasm. It's just about foreplay.
What does that mean?
Whatever happens, because so many
it's
of
so
my
important.
that they're so focused on the end game that in and of itself becomes the most limiting factor.
Right. And that causes too much stress, which the stress causes you to tighten up and feel, yeah, absolutely. And I use that all the time with my practice as well.
For both men and women in different ways. And the other thing that I tell clients to do is to play with context. Why do people have amazing sex on vacation? It's because number one, we are more relaxed. So the nervous system does play a huge role in how great our sex is, but also it's a completely new context. We don't have a pathway for that memory of our bedroom where
Right.
we're folding laundry and watching the news at night and our kids are walking in on us. So I always tell my client, play with context, have sex in a different room or a different time of day, or change the lighting, or change the smell, or rent a hotel room for an hour, in the middle of the day. Change the context, because that could be so liberating just in
I was
and
just
of
going to
itself.
say freeing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so liberating in and of itself. And experiment with different kinds of communication, with your partner, whether it's verbal communication or cues with touch. A lot of times for women that have sex and are afraid of having their partner on top of them, we teach them how to use their hands and their feet to signal to their partner to back off or slow down, because that feeling of safety, and not being afraid that you will have pain is a huge part of
Oh,
it.
it's absolutely. That communication is probably number one in the relationship. So I love all those great tips, and hopefully people will look up different ways to breathe, and that could help them with some of those exercises for sure. But before we go, I want you to give us one message that you hope every listener will walk away with today when it comes to you and pelvic floor and pelvic floor health.
I would definitely say my one message is that just because people have pain does not mean it's normal. It's common, but it's not normal. And you don't have to choose between functionality and pleasure. You can absolutely have
Love that.
both at the time.
Yes, and be your own advocate if your doctors are not.
Be your own advocate and
Yeah,
get help if you
help.
need it out there, and you deserve it.
I love that. Absolutely. And I'm glad that I took that on myself and I didn't need someone to tell me, but many people need someone to tell them. And that's a great information for everybody. So why don't you just give everybody a little idea of how we can find you if people need some support, and how they can find you on social media?
Of course, I know that all my links will be in the notes,
Yep.
but basically, if you Google my name, Susan Winograd, it'll come up. Our website is pelvicorerehab.com. Our Instagram handle is at Pelvicore Rehab and Wellness. And we also have a very robust YouTube channel called Pelvicore Rehab Plus, where we have tons of educational videos. We offer 15-minute free discovery calls. I
Right.
want people's questions to be answered. So we're out there. If you still don't know how to find me, just ask Dr. Stacy and she'll direct you our way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your wisdom, your warmth, your no nonsense truth is exactly what we need to understand the pelvic floor. To our listeners, if something felt like it hit home today, don't ignore it. You deserve to feel good in your body. As Susan says, you deserve pleasure, you deserve connection, and a healthy pelvic floor. You can find Susan, as she said, everything at Pelvicore Rehab. Check the show notes for the links. And as always, I am Dr. Stacy, reminding you your body is not broken, your needs are not too much, and your pleasure is not optional. It's essential for a healthy state of mind and a healthier sex life. See you next time on the Purple Passion Project. Thanks again, Susan.
Thank you so much.
This has been the Purple Passion Project with host Dr. Stacy Friedman. Tune in each week as Dr. Stacy breaks down walls, busting myths, and gives you permission to want more, with no shame, no filters, and definitely no small talk. Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. Powered by B2 Studios.